Well, as I've been promising you, Michael Corin is with us here on the phone. And Michael, it's so good to have you this afternoon. Michael Corin is a media personality out of Canada, quite the media personality. As a matter of fact, he's a television host, a radio personality, a syndicated columnist. He's an author, a speaker. He has a television show entitled The Arena. It airs on the Sun News Network every weeknight at 7 p.m. And Michael's also a weekly columnist. He's published every Saturday with the Toronto, Ottawa, Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg Sun newspapers, and he's in more than a dozen other newspapers across Canada. He's also a columnist for the Catholic Register, the Landowner, and the Interim. He also appears on News Talk 1010 Radio every Wednesday. Goodness, what do you do in your spare time, Michael?
I don't know. I'm tired just hearing that.
I know.
I didn't realize I was so clever. Good Lord.
You are. You're clever. I don't know. And not only that, but you're the best-selling author of 14 books, including some biographies of folks that I really admire, like C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien. And you've done biographies on that. I'm going to check out your books, and I'm going to purchase them. They are available here in the States, right? I mean, you know.
They are. There's only two were bestsellers, really. I mean, the others, they did okay, but the last two did very well. Yeah, because the last two were Random House, so they're readily available. But anything's available on the internet these days. You know?
Well, that's true, but I know you are a prolific author, and I know that you're highly, highly respected in Canada for your media persona.
Well, by some people, I am also incredibly hated by many other people.
Well, now you've just described my resume there. Well, I guess anytime you take to the airwaves and get on the radio and television, that's going to be the case. And hey, add to that mix, Michael. I'm a pastor, a senior pastor of a large church here on the Gulf Coast. And, of course, you are a Christian brother, and you've written a Christian book, and we're going to talk about that. So I guess you and I probably share a lot of the same enemies and friends, probably.
I would think so. And Canada is less Christian, less religious, I suppose. I mean, religiosity just doesn't play such a part in this country. So secularism has done more damage. Yeah. And, I mean, we have, for example, we have gay marriage. We've had it for some years now. We're the third country to introduce it. We have absolutely no abortion law at all.
Right.
We're probably unique in the civilized world. Publicly funded abortion until the 9th month and beyond. We now know that infanticide occurs about 50 times a year, where babies who survive abortion are killed or left to die. So, I mean, we have a very decadent culture. But it's one of those things where people are, they die by kindness and niceness because the economy is pretty strong, the banking system works, we have a welfare state, we have socialized medicine, it's a gentle country, the crime rate's relatively low. At the same time, we're expunging God and Christ from so much of our daily life.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because you describe your country as a gentle country, and I have traveled extensively in Western Canada and done a lot of preaching and teaching there as well, and have been in some sections of Eastern Canada, and that's exactly how the Canadians overall are a gentle people. They're gracious people. They're kind people overall. They're very they're low keyed. I mean, as you can tell, I'm pumped up, full of testosterone and high key. But when I'm in Canada, they're so gracious to me, and they seem to just tolerate me. But Canadians are kind folks. But the flip side of that is, goodness, it's so godless from coast to coast overall.
It is. I as you can tell from my accent, I spent the first half of my life in Britain. I'm British. I married a Canadian, so I've been here half my life now. Right. And it's worse in Europe. I mean, in Britain, it is aggressively anti-God. Yeah. It's not quite so bad here. But because we are in Canada a fairly gentle people, it's very difficult to get people angry, well, maybe that's not the right word, just active about certain issues.
Passionate.
Yeah, and they simply won't be, and they just allow things to happen, which is very, very dangerous. And, of course, Canada prides itself on, I'm afraid, not being American. So whenever, for example, our Prime Minister, who isn't and I think he's probably a nominal Christian, but he's a relatively conservative. But when he was first elected a few years ago, he said, and I've never heard it before from a Canadian Prime Minister, he said, God bless Canada.
Wow.
And the mainstream media had a fit. They accused him of being an American. How dare you say God bless Canada? You sound like George Bush, they said.
They went apoplectic on you.
They did.
Good gracious. Well, God bless him. God bless him. So did God bless Canada under him? Or he's still in office, isn't he?
He is, and I certainly hope that he continues to be. He's not ideal, but I'll give you an example. He's probably the most actively pro-Israel and anti-Hezbollah, anti-Hamas leader in the entire world, outside, of course, of Benjamin Netanyahu. Right. He puts the American president to shame. We were the first country to take away all funding from Gaza after Hamas won the election, and he has some wonderful cabinet ministers working for him. But also, it's a conservative government, but there are those sort of, how shall I put it, low taxes, low morals types. They're quite interested in fiscal restraint, but they don't care what people do in their personal, private, and moral lives, and that's not my sort of conservatism.
Right. No, I understand. But, as you said, I mean, given the choices that you have, you're kind of hoping that he hangs in there for a while.
Well, the alternative is, realistically, is quite horrible. Well, it's a child, in fact, called Justin Trudeau, whose father was Pierre Trudeau, and this is a man with very nice hair and fairly good-looking, and absolutely nothing in his skull at all. I mean, he's completely free of brain. I mean, I know him. I mean, he's a nice enough guy, but with all due respect, he's an idiot. He's only there because he's Pierre Trudeau's son. But he is a leftist, and if he does win the election, we will be in enormous trouble.
He sounds like the Canadian version of Barack Obama.
In some ways, I mean, whatever Obama is, I don't think Obama's a fool. Justin Trudeau is.
Right.
It's even worse.
I got you. Hey, listen, Michael, let's do this because we're running out of time, and I really want to spend time on you and your book, because your latest book is entitled Heresy: 10 Lies They Spread About Christianity. Give us an intro and an overview of your book. Then we're going to take a brief time out. When we come back, I'm going to get into the guts of your book, into some of the specifics. Okay. But first, as you're giving your intro, tell people where they can get it, your website, and where they can get your book.
Well, God bless you for asking that. They can go to my website, which is michaelcorin, Coren.com. But if they just go to Amazon, and Amazon.com and type in my name, the book will come up and they can order it that way. And it's really the result of years and years of hosting talk radio and talk TV and having to respond to pretty much every attack on Christianity. I've heard them all.
Yes.
And I thought I'd put together a 75,000-word book, an accessible book, so that people who don't have too much time to go through huge volumes can just have a response to the usual nonsense, Hitler was a Christian, Christians support slavery, Christians are stupid, Christians are frightened of change, Christians are anti-scientific, bad things happen to good people, how could a good God allow that? I mean, all the usual stuff, and some of the fallacies about Scripture. So in an accessible way, there are 10 chapters there, and I hope it empowers people a bit to respond to arguments. And if they don't want to do that, I've always said what they can do is just hit someone with the book.
Michael Corin is our guest today. He's a television host, radio personality, syndicated columnist, author, speaker out of Canada, Toronto, Canada. He's quite the media personality there. He's a best-selling author. He's the author of 14 books. He's received several honorary doctorate degrees, a number of prestigious awards for his writing and broadcasting. His latest book is called Heresy: 10 Lies They Spread About Christianity. He is a brother in the Lord. It is my honor to have Michael Corin on with us today. Michael, welcome back to Freedom Friday.
Great pleasure, really is.
Well, God bless you, Michael. Tell the folks again where they can find you on your website, where they can find your book, and then I've got a couple questions to ask you about your book.
Well, if they go to my website, which is michaelcorin, Coren.com, they can get it there. But if they just go to Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, wherever they're listening, or Amazon.uk, they can buy the book, and probably cheaper than buying it in the store, I should think.
Okay, good. Heresy: 10 Lies They Spread About Christianity. Well, so listen, I've read everything I can read online about your book. I'm going to order your book. I want it for my library. But one of the things I know that your book, it's a defense of the faith, basically, and one of the things that your book defends is that Christianity is not anti-scientific. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, this is a myth that people have used for the past, certainly 30 or 40 years. But it's interesting that before that, they wouldn't have dreamt of doing it, because people always knew that the Christian church was the handmaiden of science. You'll always hear Galileo. I've always said this, and whenever someone says, what about Galileo? They can never spell Galileo. It's like the one scientist who wasn't treated well by Christianity. But if you look at the whole history of Christendom, whether it's Catholic or Protestant, the great minds, Copernicus, Catholic priest, for example, Isaac Newton, devout Protestant believer, Michael Faraday was a lay preacher, Louis Pasteur, highly devout man. It just goes on and on and on, right up until the 20th century, the 21st century. I mean, it's estimated that half, 50% of academics in the hard sciences at university level are believers in Christ. Now, remember the context. It's not easy being a Christian at academic level, so these people must really believe. There's no contradiction between the highest scientific ability and capability and Christian belief. It's a myth that has been developed by, frankly, some very foolish Christians who've played into the hands of the left.
Thank you.
And organized atheists who've tried to take advantage of this, as they always do. But I find it quite fascinating that the people who are trying to limit scientific research today, it's the hard left, people like PETA, people for the ethical treatment of animals, who are threatening scientists who work with animals, vivisection. Look, I'm an animal lover. I wish no animal could ever suffer. But if we have to work on 1,000 monkeys to cure cancer and make sure children don't die of cancer, I'm afraid that's going to happen. These people say, no, don't do that. And the other part of the coalition is Islam, that has these obsessive ideas that we shouldn't go past the 7th or 8th century in our scientific knowledge. So Christians want to push scientific knowledge and progress, and we're accused of being Neanderthal and ignorant. And Islam and the far left say, don't move forward at all, and apparently they're the enlightened ones.
Right, right. Absolutely. Well stated. Listen, so one of the points that your book makes is that Christians and Christian ideas are lampooned and lambasted, caricatured in the media as well as in society. I mean, how do you speak to that in your book?
Well, I think it's pretty much a self-evident truth if you watch mainstream TV and radio. I mean, it just happens all the time. I don't know about you, but myself, if I'm watching on my family and we watch a show and there is at least a fair portrayal of a Christian, we look at each other and say, "My golly, did you see that? I mean, that was really quite fair, wasn't it?" We shouldn't have to do that. Now, a TV should expose warts and all. Right. Which, of course, is a phrase used by Oliver Cromwell, the great Puritan leader. Right. It should expose the truth about Christians as it should about anyone. But I'll give you an example. In this country, and you can see it in the United States, but I recommend you don't, we have a comedy, so-called comedy show called Little Mosque on the Prairie, which portrays an Islamic family as being these lovable, rather silly people who just go around being nice and kind and a bit silly. And there's no mention of honor killings or female genital mutilation or homicide bombs or Sharia law or jihad or anything like that. Right. The only Christian there are two Christians in the show. One of them is an Anglican or Episcopalian. He's very liberal and he's okay. Yeah. And then there's the evangelical. Yeah. And he represents all that is evil and dark. And this is entirely typical of certainly of Canadian and European TV. Christians are the bigots. They spend their whole time screaming about homosexuals. They hate Muslims, who actually are really very nice people, don't you know? Yeah. And they just don't like progress, and they beat their wives and children. And this is the standard line. And I'm all for humor. If it's funny, pretty much it goes with me. I don't mind. But if you made this sort of comment, if you made this mockery of any other identifiable group, certainly in Canada, you'd be before a Human Rights Commission. Right. If you do it about Christians, you're given a government grant. Right,
right. Well, what kind of freedoms do pastors not have in their pulpits in Canada? We hear so much about that. I mean, you're right in the middle of it. Tell us the truth.
It's an important point, actually. It's a good question, because generally what we have now, you all have in 10 years' time. The whole same-sex marriage debate. I wrote quite a long piece for the National Review last year about the consequences of gay marriage, beyond the moral ones, the destruction of genuine marriage. We see that in Scandinavia and the danger to children. It's what happens to people who oppose it. Now, when we brought in gay marriage, but as one example in this country, very quickly there was a concerted attack on Christian organizations. The Roman Catholic Bishop of Calgary, who gave a very intelligent, loving response to gay marriage, love the individual, but we cannot affirm homosexuality. Marriage has a specific reason in being one man and one woman. He was contacted by Revenue Canada, the tax service, and threatened. And he was then threatened with being taken to a Human Rights Commission. Now, in this country, a Human Rights Commission, if someone complains about you, they don't have to have a lawyer. They don't have to even proceed with anything. They just make the complaint. You then, if you want to defend yourself with a lawyer, and you should have a lawyer, you have to pay for it. There's no legal defense. There is no due process as we would know it. Wow. There's barely any right of appeal. It's a kangaroo court. Now, I have to say we've fought back. Mark Stein, who you might know of, and some others, they really fought back against these human rights commissions, and we've won a few battles. But a friend of mine, I haven't seen him in a while though, Scott Brocky, an evangelical fellow, a printer, he does printing work. He merely said he didn't want to print material from an organization called the Gay and Lesbian Archive.
Right.
And he had gay clients. He said, I don't care about your sexuality. It's the material that you're asking me to print. And it's offensive to me as a Christian. He recommended other printers who would do it. They said, no, it has to be you. And it cost him tens and tens of thousands of dollars.